Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Jay. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ben, thanks. Glad to be here.
Love it. Well, Jay, I'm really excited for the subject that we're going to dive into today. But before we get into it, maybe just introduce yourself. Let people get to know you. Love to hear what you love about content as well and kind of how you got into the space.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Jay Cook. I've been in content marketing for about 20 years now. I studied journalism in school. That was my passion. I loved reading and writing, and I loved storytelling and asking questions. I came out of college. I didn't go get a newspaper job. I started traveling. So I traveled a fair bit. I wound up teaching abroad in Prague and in Korea. And I settled in the San Francisco Bay Area about 25 years ago. Got a job at Lonely Planet, which was a dream job for a traveler's perspective. And it was really there where I began getting into content marketing, working with brands on telling stories. I've been doing that on and off for the past 15 years now. Travel industry, working in healthcare, robotics, and I just love it. You could do so much with content for businesses to help them reach customers, tell stories, and get the job done.
I love it. And I love your experience. Like, you have a way cooler career than I do. I love that you traveled. I love that you got this breadth of experience. And I love that you started out in journalism. I think that there is so much to be said for marketers who bring this variety of background into their experience. They know how to connect with people. They know how to tell their stories. They have had these experiences and can relate to people. It's just a cool background. I think that there's a lot of value in that. And I think marketing is a cool area because so many people come into it from all over the place. I know one of the greatest people I've ever worked with, he had a philosophy background and loved reading like ancient Greek philosophy and all sorts of stuff, but a tremendous writer and a tremendous thinker and things like that. But it's so cool that we kind of get this mixture of personalities and backgrounds in marketing. So it's a lot of fun. So I love your experience.
I appreciate that. And I completely agree. The journalism background has served me so well throughout my career. It all goes back to the WH questions: who, what, when, where, why. And from a marketing perspective, you have to nail those first. You have your tactics and you've got your tools and all that stuff matters, but who are the customers? What are the pain points? Why are we here today trying to solve this problem? How are we going to do it? I feel like that career armed me pretty well, even though I never did go work at the daily news desk. That's okay.
Well, today's subject, we're going to be talking about pillar content and how you can repurpose it, the purpose of pillar content, what it does for a business, why you should potentially look at it, things of that nature. So right off the bat, Jay, when you're looking at pillar content, what do you mean by pillar content? What's the difference between a piece of pillar content versus your everyday, average, run-of-the-mill content? What is the difference?
Sure. Well, think of a bridge, right? A bridge connects two places because you've got pillars that the roadway can stand on top of. And your pillars are your pillar content, large foundational pieces of content that you build. You spend a decent amount of time building these things, but then they support all of the traffic that's going to go in and out of your business to and from your site, really throughout the calendar year. So pillar content to me that can be a few core themes that you really want your organization to be known for. Those could be your business, your product. It could be about the themes that you're looking to tackle for that year itself. And the advantage of pillar content is that you can, after you've created it, you can tap into it and repurpose that content for across all sorts of channels throughout the rest of the year.
I love that. So when you look at pillar content, do you have any recommendations for how often you should create this content? Is it purely like an element of resources, or are there some kind of a cadence that makes sense? I know sometimes people are like, well, you create one pillar piece of content per year or a quarter or every month. From your experience, do you have any recommendations on frequency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think it depends on the business for sure. And you're absolutely right about resources. One advantage to pillar content is it allows you to do more with fewer resources. Um, Annual is a really good approach, but so is quarterly too. I almost feel like you could have a main pillar and then supporting pillars that happen. Something robust that you might put your marketing muscle behind. Good example of that could be an annual report, the state of the state type of content that you have. That's great content to release in the early part of the year, establish your thought leadership, appeal to folks when they're in that new year, new world kind of mindset. But there's also sub content that you can create throughout the course of the year too. Because the other thing about, as we know about marketing, is you have to be able to iterate and optimize. So if you plan in January to release a big piece of content about something, and then in your industry, some other event happens that becomes really important by May, you should definitely be ready to pivot and create something robust around that too.
So you mentioned you can actually do more with less, meaning, having pillar content actually doesn't strain your resources. I think, off the very get-go, you might think, man, pillar content, that's too extreme for my business. What do you mean by the fact that you can get more out of your content and your resources if you actually use a pillar content and repurpose strategy?
Sure, man. It's almost, so I think of it like meal prep, right? You could, if you want to plan out your meals for the week, you can spend Sunday, a few hours, in front of the stove, creating some stuff and then packaging it, putting it in the fridge and the freezer. And then during the week, you can go in and grab a meal when you need it. You do the heavy lifting up front. Pillar content, one of the advantages right there is that the work that's done in the beginning, you can then repurpose and refer back to throughout the course of the year. You're not constantly reinventing the wheel or opening up the fridge and saying, what am I going to cook today? You still can do that for sure. And there's plenty of times during the year when you want to lean in on that type of creation, whether it's cooking or creating content, but you don't have to. And that pillar content allows you to also, in addition to having these great resources that you can use, from a marketing perspective, it really helps you stay on brand, on point, on focus. That rule of 7, right? Folks need to hear a message, a few times before it really lands with them. Pillar content allows you to keep reinforcing those key points throughout the year too.
I love that. So when you're talking about repurposing, what are some opportunities to repurpose? So if I'm creating a pillar piece of content, obviously that can look and feel and be different formats, whether it's video or written or whatever it may be. How do you typically approach the ability to repurpose? What is your strategic advice to slice and dice and reuse the content over and over again?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think about creating something like, for example, a white paper, right? Very well researched, dense topic that shows an academic mindset and an awareness of the business that you're working in. You create that, but then you can take that content and shave it down into different forms. That can be a series of blog posts that you run on your site, which help with your SEO. It's awesome for email drip campaigns too. This could, and email is the best channel and for conversions, in my opinion. You're able to bring people in and constantly reinforce them with stuff. You could turn your pillar content into an email series that's either for a completely new segment of folks that are in your email database or your existing ones. And social media. I mean, that's the other really great one there too. I mean, you could populate your LinkedIn channel with pieces, snippets from that. Little teasers that actually point back to that key white paper or something along those lines. If that's gated downloadable content, that's also great. The other advantage to something like that, if you have a large signature piece of content, it's a great way to capture emails, right? You can capture emails, and you could also A/B test things like titles. If you can segment out the audience 2 different ways to approach a piece of content, and you see 2 out of 3 of them are engaging with this headline, not that headline, well, that's a great way to course correct and optimize.
I love that. That's awesome. So, we live in this day and age of artificial intelligence. especially on the generative AI side of things, content is easier to create than ever before. It's being created at a speed that we have never been able to like fathom before. We did some studies, and our estimation is in the next 3 years, there'll be a 200x increase in the amount of content published online. So with that much content being produced, how do you recommend people write and create pillar content that actually stands out and actually provides value?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, that's really the question of our times when it comes to content. Brand voice, I think, has a lot to do with it. Storytelling has a ton to do with it too. AI has a lot of really wonderful capabilities when it comes to creating content, but you still want to stand apart. I always lean back on this idea of points of parity and points of differentiation. You want to be able to be known for being experts in your area that your competitors are going to know about too. What's different about you, your brand story? Through pillar content or content in general, you can weave in that brand voice, that style, that flair, that tone of voice. That can help offset the nature of what might be seen as redundancy that's out there for some of the content that you see. In a space like travel, for example, it would be really easy for AI to start spitting out recommendations of places to go in New York City or London or Tokyo or whatever. But having a unique brand, unique tone of voice behind your content, whether it's engaging or cheeky or academic or whatever your business requires, that's one way to sort of stand apart from the AI thing. Another thing too is, quite frankly, and here's where social really comes into play too, is the responsiveness. Make it a two-way conversation. No disrespect to chatbots, but nothing really beats an actual human, because there's nuance and there's innuendo and there's humor that you could have in those conversations too.
I love that. I think that's really powerful. So as you're looking at pillar content, there's this trend where, especially in B2B, there are individual influencers and creators starting to pop up that sort of represent the business. I know executives and leaders of businesses, they're starting to write and publish more content in their business's behalf. With pillar content, do you typically have it published from the business? Have you experimented with it coming out from individuals? There's obviously thought leadership and there's value there. What are some approaches, and how do you look at that with this new kind of momentum towards businesses getting less credibility on platforms, especially like LinkedIn, and individuals are the ones that the algorithm is promoting and working with?
Well, personalization is huge. I was looking at a study yesterday about Gen Z behaviors in Southeast Asia and the consumers, and it's like a 65% increase in engagement if something is personalized. So having that type of human touch does make a difference. Whether that's an actual influencer or somebody who's in essence the brand voice, if you will. I mean, it really goes a long way. That's a way that businesses can then tap into channels like Instagram or TikTok and show a fun side too. I mean, content is there to inform, it's there to entertain, and it's there to engage. And so the human element will have a big impact on its effectiveness in the long term. Just look at your own inbox sometime, and when you see an email that comes from company name or Jay at company name, Jay is almost your friend, and you would engage with Jay a little bit more than just company name.
Yeah, I love that. So one final question, because again, these episodes are short and sweet and to the point, and I've already learned so much. I have a ton of notes from this episode, so thank you. You talked about those 3 pillars of content, and I've often heard it where it's just the first 2. It's to entertain and educate or inform. You talked about engage, and you also mentioned this earlier on. What are some ways businesses can be better at engaging with their pillar content, with repurposing content? Because I think sometimes we feel like our content is a one-directional piece of content. We're blasting it, we're lecturing it, we're posting it, but you talked about engage, and I think that's so vital. How can people start to wrap their minds around this idea of engaging through their content?
That's a great question. Your brand fans can become your great advocates too. And every brand should feel comfortable engaging with their folks, asking them questions, getting their feedback, soliciting feedback. I ordered a kitchen product the other day from Amazon, and it came with a card that suggested that that I reach out to them and register as part of their consumer group, because all feedback is wanted and then valued, and it's true. So I think having that feedback loop, not only does it make for one customer feel that they have merit and that you care about them, it also provides you an opportunity to turn that customer into an advocate for you. It's not just about retention, which is huge. You've got the funnel, you want to keep people there. But if they can advocate for you, if you can get earned media from folks because you've had good two-way interaction, that's great. If you gate your content along ways that allow people to comment on it, that's wonderful. If you have videos that you're running, you'll let people comment on it, and then get in there and humanize it. Because here's the other thing. Your competition might not be doing that. And if they're not doing it and you are, that's a way that you can win.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's a great way to end this episode today. Jay, thank you so much for the information. Super valuable. If anyone wants to continue the conversation and connect with you online, how and where can they find you?
No, absolutely, Ben. Well, thank you for starters. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. You can find me. JCookSF is my handle on LinkedIn. It's a great way to get a hold of me there. I like to post content on content, thought leadership, best practices in marketing, silly pictures of me and my dog. So let's go through LinkedIn. That's a great way to stay in touch with me.
Love it. And we'll link to it in the show notes. Jay, again, thanks for your time today.
Ben, thank you. This was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.